Okay, I think I am live on YouTube. This is my first time doing live on YouTube. Let me go live here on Instagram, and then we'll dive into this sleep Q&A. Okay, I think we are live on Instagram, and I'm doing something a little different today. Instead of going live on Facebook as well, so usually I do Instagram and Facebook, I am doing Instagram and YouTube on my YouTube channel. So for those of you who are new here on Instagram, I now have a YouTube channel as well where the podcast is and other videos are held there as well. So this is my monthly nap chat. If you don't know me, my name is Allison Egidi. I'm a pediatric sleep coach. I founded Sleep and Wellness Coach back in 2016. I live in Keswick, Virginia, and I help parents who have children who are struggling with their sleep, all the way from newborn into the teen years. And every month since I founded Sleep and Wellness Coach back in 2016, I have hosted a free live sleep Q&A. And that's what this is. I call it nap chat because it generally happens around a nap time. Of course, I don't have nappers anymore, but that's how it got its name. And there is a post that goes up on my Instagram page inviting people to submit questions in advance. So that goes up a day in advance of the live Q&A, and I'll start with answering those questions. There were a handful, and then I'm happy to take any live questions. So if you didn't get a chance to submit your question in advance and you're on Instagram, you can put it in the comments of this video, or if you're on YouTube, you can put it in the comments there. And as soon as I get through the pre-submitted questions, I will transition over to any live questions. Before I dive in, I also like to share that I have a podcast. It's called How Long Till Bedtime, and you can find it anywhere you listen to podcasts, including on my YouTube channel. And I cover a lot of topics. We're in year 4 of the podcast. And so if there's a specific topic you're looking for, and you've missed the live portion of this, you can always check out the How Long Till Bedtime podcast. You can also learn more about how I and the sleep coaches on my team work with families one-on-one, and about online workshops and programs I have available by visiting sleepandwellnesscoach.com. Okay, on to these pre-submitted questions. These came in through Instagram, and okay, the of course with Instagram it's always the handles, but it's Amber said 2.5-year-old isn't napping well, not in the crib. Took the binky back in April, and naps and sleep went downhill after. She will sleep on the couch maybe 4 out of 7 days a week, which I'm honestly fine with. It's bedtime. She's climbing out. But if we transition to toddler bed, she'll end up in our room. Can't let her cry it out in her room because our rooms all share a wall and we have a baby. Most nights we have to stand in her room over the crib until she falls asleep. She just came out of the sleep sack. We are putting off the bed transition as long as possible, but current situation is very frustrating. Okay. This is a tough one when they can get out of the crib. So I am a big advocate of keeping children in the crib as long as we can, at least until the age of 3, ideally longer if possible. I kept both of my kids in the crib until they were 4, and it made for a very easy and smooth transition from the crib and into the big kid bed. And the reason the longer they're in the crib, the better, is because you're buying their brain more time to develop more impulse control. And that gets significantly stronger, that impulse control, once they're 3 or older. And so that's why with a 2.5-year-old, it can be tricky to convince them it's a good idea to stay in their bed because they're impulsive and they wake up and they have that idea they should come into your room or come into your bed, and that's what they're going to do. So my first thought here is, you mentioned that she's just out of the sleep sack. can we get her back in the sleep sack? So the sleep sack is one of the best ways to have children safely remain in the crib because when they go to swing that leg over to climb out, it catches them 9 out of 10 times. I would say I have about 1 in 10 kids who that I work with who even with the sleep sack are so strong and agile that they can still get out of the crib. So my first thought here though is can we get her back in a sleep sack that fits? One that I really like is Kite Baby as far as length and the ability to turn it around and zip it on backwards if you have a 2.5-year-old who's zipping it off. So check that out. And it hopefully that will work and you can find a way to safely keep her in the crib. And then I totally hear you on the not letting her cry it out because it could be disruptive. But there will likely need to be some time where you're willing to put up with protest because a 2.5-year-old is very opinionated. And if she's decided the way this works now is that you stay in the room and look over her crib until she falls asleep, and then you try to do something different, that is going to be met with protest, even if you're not doing cry it out. I actually have a whole workshop on this topic, a $27 1-hour workshop called How to Quickly Recover from a Sleep Regression. And it is for kids who are in the crib between 15 months and about 30 months. And so that goes over a whole hour plan on how to do it. I can't go over an hour plan here. But what I would say is the really important thing with this age group is that you communicate what the plan is. So if it's, I'm no longer going to stand here while you fall asleep, then what is it that you're going to do? I'm going to do this bedtime routine, reminding her what the bedtime routine is. I'm going to put you in the crib and then I'm going to leave. And it's your job to fall asleep and sleep in your room until your light turns green. Really important tool, by the way, a light that indicates when it's okay to get out of the crib. Big fan of the hatch for that because it gives you some flexibility because you can control it from your phone. And so then if you're saying, you don't want to do cried out, there are other ways you can engage. You can pop back in and check on her. But you just want to communicate whatever method you've decided to move forward with. You want to communicate what that is. Because a powerful thing about a 2.5-year-old is even if they aren't very verbal, they understand so much. And so you can help them understand what's happening as you're going through this kind of reset. So that's something to keep in mind. And then think about with your room and the baby's room and the sharing walls, a little bit of, we might have to have a little short-term pain for long-term gain. Hopefully that makes sense. Because now this could be a slippery slope if we keep going. So hopefully that helps a little bit. And if you're not able to keep her safely in the crib, then you may need to transition her out of the crib. And you'll want to have a plan on how you're going to handle that. So maybe you use a baby gate at her door and you totally clear out that room so it's safe in there and you can think of the bedroom as a crib. There are different ways to go about that. I actually have a whole program that walks you through different methods for 2.5 to 6-year-olds when they are out of the crib and in their big kid bed. So I walk you through 4 different ways to approach that. And so either that workshop or the program you could find at sleepandwellnesscoach.com/programs. But no matter what method you try to go with, you have to communicate clearly what you expect from her, which is to be in her room / bed until her light turns green, and what she can expect from you in return. So what is your bedtime routine going to look like? If she's not cooperating, meaning she's crying when you leave the room, how are you going to be responding? And what are you no longer going to be doing? Standing next to the bed. So communicating what she can expect does not mean it'll be tear-free, but it can really help the process move along faster because she's like, huh, that's what she said she's going to do, and that's what she's doing. Okay, the next pre-submitted question was Andrea said, 25-month-old who has been struggling with sleep. She sleeps in a crib in her own room. Bedtime is 6:30, and she takes one nap at 12:30, usually lasting about an hour and a half. We followed your advice and have a consistent bedtime routine: bath, 2 books, a song, and then into the crib. Love it. She goes down easily and had been sleeping through the night for several months. However, during a recent trip, she got sick and started waking up multiple times during the night. Offering water helped. She would take a sip and go right back to sleep. Since returning home, she's continued waking up at 2:30 asking for water. She'll take a sip or two and then settle back down. It's been 4 months of this, and we're not sure how to break the habit and get her sleeping through the night again. Help. Okay, this is really, really classic, you guys. We can have the bestest of sleepers, and then the most common trigger for a sleep regression is an illness or travel. And what did you were on a trip and sick. So you had the double whammy where you were on a trip and she got sick. And so, of course, particularly when they're sick, you're going to do things differently. You're going to meet your child's needs. We're not going to leave a child who's sick to cry it out and figure it out on their own. And that's what you should do. And that's what you did. And if you're on a trip, it's probably even involving more engagement to keep her comfortable and happy and not disrupting everyone nearby on your trip. So, not uncommon. The key to not having new things, new aids or crutches that you introduce during an illness or during a trip become a regression is to reset quickly. Obviously, it's been 4 months, so you probably feel like that train has left the station. You can still reset. But just going forward, and for anyone else watching or listening, know that one of the most important things you can do is reset really quickly once you're back home and or your child is feeling better. So this water one is an easy one. And I know it's easy for me to say that on this side of the camera. It's going to be easy in that it should be a pretty quick fix, but it doesn't mean, again, that it will be tear-free or not a period of pushback involved. So again, similar, because we're talking about similar age group, to the previous question, communication is going to be really, really important. And so make sure you would say to her, here's how I would handle it is, hey, I know when you were sick, we were giving you water and you keep asking for water, but you know what? You're waking sleeping people when you do that. And so starting tonight, after we put you to bed, there will be no more water until your light turns green. Again, I like to have this visual for kids 2 and older of, well, when am I going to get water? When am I allowed to get up? It's when the light turns green. So there's going to be no more water until the light turns green. And if you wake up and you're calling for me and crying or asking me for water, I'm not going to give you water. The only thing I'm going to do is come in and say, I don't know what her name is. Let's say it's Susie. I'm going to come in and say, Susie, the light is not green. It's not time for water. It's time to be sleeping. You'll have water when the light turns green. Night, night. And that's it. Period. The end. And so you'll do that. And then she's going to be like, what? And you're going to get some pushback and she's might cry or scream. And you can check back in every 10 or 15 minutes and say that same line over and over again, or you can just leave her be. I do want you to acknowledge her at least once so she knows you heard her. But the key is you told her in the morning or at bedtime that you weren't going to give any more water until the light turned green. If you told her what you were going to say if she called, you went in and you said it, and then you power through. I will tell you, this typically takes 2 to 3 nights and it's done. Just how they're so smart that she quickly got reconditioned to, when I wake up, I get a sip of water. They can get reconditioned to not expecting that sip of water. So hopefully that helps. And in just a couple days, you'll be back to having your amazing sleeper on your awesome schedule you described. Okay. Um, I think this is the last pre-submitted question. Okay, Alexa B and a series of numbers said, my question is regarding early wakings and transition out of the crib. My 24-month-old, you guys, what a trend. We're at like all 2.5 year olds. My 24-month-old recently transitioned from his crib to his big boy bed, a twin floor bed from Nestig. Our bedtime routine is bath, nursing, haven't totally weaned yet, and then books or music. We do bath at 7:38. He usually doesn't fall asleep until 9. I do stay in the room with him until he falls asleep and have continued this with the twin bed. He doesn't have a problem falling asleep, but since we transitioned to the floor bed, he wakes up from sliding off in the middle of the night, ordering a guardrail, and has been waking about an hour earlier at around 6:30 instead of his normal 7:30. Naps have also not been lasting as long. He used to nap between 2 and 3 hours, nap time at 12:31, and now it's about an hour. Other than adding the rails, is there anything I can do to support lengthening his sleep to his regular amount again? He's very tired. Yes. Okay. So my very first thought is, can we bring the crib back? And I know that's not what parents want to hear, but I just had a mom who brought the crib back for, how old was her daughter? 2.5 maybe, but they had moved her out. She had been an amazing sleeper forever. Didn't go well. And I talked her into bringing the crib back, and she's got her amazing sleeper back in just like 3 nights. So if you still have the crib and you didn't move him out because you couldn't safely keep him in the crib, please consider bringing the crib back. Bring the crib back, put him in a sleep sack so he doesn't climb out, and then reset. It's really, I've already mentioned it and I won't like beat this dead horse, but if we can keep kids in the crib until as close to 3 as possible, or like in my example, until they're 4, you're buying their brain more time to have impulse control, which means that they won't just hop out of the bed every time. It's more reasonable to stay in your bed until the light turns green. So when they wake up at 6:30, they can get back to sleep versus that impulse to just get up and be up for the day. So my first recommendation, if you can, is to bring the crib back. When you bring the crib back, then prior to moving him out again, you want to have a really solid plan on how you're going to do that. I actually have a workshop on this as well, a $27 workshop, 1-hour workshop called How to Have a Smooth Transition Out of the Crib and Into a Big Kid Bed. But again, my first preference would be to bring him back into the crib and wait until 3. But then this workshop helps you prepare in advance. You don't want to do this transition on a whim. Not only do you want to be prepared with a plan, you want to have communicated this plan very clearly to your child with clear expectations of what it means to have a big kid bed. And then also, prior to getting into the big kid bed, it's ideal if you teach them to fall asleep independently on their own. And the reason that's important is if kids are accustomed to having a parent with them when they fall asleep, I always say, in their defense, if they wake up in the middle of the night, they will think, well, I better get someone back in here to be with me until I fall back asleep because that's what I need to fall asleep. And so that's why you'll continue to have middle of the night wakings or early wakings, because that's what they're conditioned to expecting when they fall asleep. Therefore, that's what they're going to look for when they fall back to sleep. So I would really encourage you to get him back in the crib if you can safely, meaning he doesn't climb out, and a sleep sack will help with that. And then work on teaching him to fall asleep independently on his own, and then move forward with a plan for transitioning him out of the bed. Another thing that can help you here. So now he's overtired because he's taking longer to fall asleep and he's waking earlier. It's counterintuitive, but often when they start to fall asleep later, the bedtime gets later, or they're just taking longer to fall asleep, they don't fall into as high of quality of sleep. And then they actually are more likely to wake earlier. And he's taking a shorter nap. So we know that his typical bedtime now is too late because his nap has shortened and he's going to be overtired by his typical bedtime. So I would really back that bedtime up. If he is clearly tired, he could go to bed. If you're saying he was previously going to bed, sounds like closer to 8, I would really back that up, like 6:30, 7. Help him get to sleep sooner. He'll if you do nothing else, if you're like, "You know what, Allison, I'm not backtracking on that crib, and I am gonna stay in the room until he falls asleep." The one thing you could do to just maybe give you some natural relief without changing anything else is have him go to bed significantly earlier so that he gets more sleep. Because guess what else helps with impulse control? Sleep. If we're overtired, it negatively impacts emotional regulation and impulse control, among with other things, but that's what you're going to experience most with this age group. So if you do nothing else, try a much earlier bedtime, because what I like to see at 24 months is ideally 2 to 2.5 hours of napping, an hour and a half at the lowest level, but ideally 2 to 2.5 hours, and 11 to 12 hours of night sleep. So as he's on this path of taking shorter naps, and because he was napping 2 to 3 hours, you said. So he's taking shorter naps and he's sleeping less at night. He is on the overtired hamster wheel. So we need to try to get him some more sleep for sure. Okay. Let me. All right. Those were all the pre-submitted questions. Let me scroll back here on Instagram. There were a couple live questions. And again, if you are on YouTube and you have a question about your child's sleep, put it in the comments or the chat, and I'm happy to take some live questions here. All right, Corey ESP said, we just took away my 17-month-old's binky at nap time and bedtime last week. He has been sleeping less. Is it too soon to take it away from him? Ooh, good question. So I'm going to preface my answer with, I am not a pediatric dentist. I do have a very good relationship with a couple of pediatric dentists and my children's orthodontist. And I've talked to them about this topic at length, because there are many concerns that people, well, not many, there are several concerns that people may have around a binky. But the biggest one is it can literally change the structure of a child's mouth. So both the palate and their teeth. Same thing with thumb sucking or finger sucking. And what I have been told is that by the time they're 2, you want to limit the use of the pacifier of the binky to the crib. And then by the time they're 3, you really want to be done with it. And I will just tell you a personal story on this. Both of my kids loved their binkies, and I did not want to mess with their sleep, because absolutely true that removing a binky can negatively impact some children's sleep if they have a strong desire for non-nutritive sucking to soothe. And so I did that. At 2, I limited both their pacifiers to the crib, and I threw them away on their 3rd birthday. I have a whole podcast episode on this, by the way, about how I broke up with my kids' pacifiers and how I recommend doing it. So I did that. And my second daughter, just to talk about the formation of the mouth, she had no chin. She had a really strong overbite, and because of that, she had no chin structure, and I was very nervous about it. And the dentist assured me, if you limit it to the bed, which didn't fix the chin, but then we get rid of it by the time she's 3, within 6 months, a lot of this will self-correct. And I was like, oh, really? I was skeptical, but also he's the expert, and I really like and trust him. I'm telling you guys, in less than 6 months, she had a chin. It was really amazing. Now, both of my kids needed braces, but so did I. And so, but they're fine. They got expanders when they needed it, and then they got braces. And would they maybe have not needed braces? Probably not, because we are people with huge teeth and narrow palates. So that's something to keep in mind. So my general recommendation in alignment with speaking with pediatric dentists and orthodontists is as long as we limit it to the crib by the time they're 2 and get rid of it by the time they're 3, that there is not a long-term negative impact on the structure of their mouth. Um, so with that being said, I would suggest that you possibly consult with your pediatrician and or a pediatric dentist and who has seen your child and the structure of their mouth and see if they have any concern. Um, and so you could bring it back and maybe since you've already done away with it, maybe it would just be for sleep. You wouldn't bring it back full time. And you can then move forward if you wanted to with the plan that I talk about in the podcast episode about how to talk to them about it. But if you're like, no, this ship has sailed and we are not bringing it back, you might want to think about an earlier bedtime to help him get to sleep a little earlier. So even if he's waking earlier, he's getting a little bit more sleep. Sticking to a consistent schedule generally. So even if he's waking earlier, stick with his nap time. So let's say it's ideally sometime between 12 and 12:30. Let's say it's 12:30. Even if he wakes early, stick to 12:30. We want to not have his whole rhythm get thrown off. So the one place I will adjust is if they're clearly overtired, I'll put them to bed early. But we keep steady with our nap time because having the nap time fluctuate too much can lead to the rest of it getting more challenging. So hopefully that helps a little bit. Okay. Alexandra said, hello, my 18-month-old goes to sleep at 7 or 7:30, takes a power nap at 7:38. You're welcome, Corey. Naps. Takes a power nap. I think you're referring to 7:38 a.m. power nap. I think. Naps from 12:15 to 2:15, but still wakes up at 4:30, and I have to stay in bed with her until 6, so she's not up. And people, okay, that's where your power nap is coming in. Okay. First of all, oh yeah, AM. Been there, done that. Did that with my oldest daughter, who's the whole reason I have this business, and did it until I hired a sleep coach when she was nearly 2 years old and had to break up with that morning power nap to get things back on track because she was also waking up between 4 and 4:30 for the day. Then she took this a nap at 8:30, and then an afternoon nap, round and round we go. So I can really relate to your spot here. Here's what I would suggest. You do not let that 7:30 to 8 nap happen. So what you're kind of getting there is a split night. And the body has just fallen into this rhythm. And this happens a lot with sleep. Like we can kind of get on one of these broken sleep rhythm hamster wheels, and it's very hard to get off. And so what you would do is I would suggest not being sure that you don't feed anything before 6:30 a.m. Sounds like you're not doing anything before 6, which is great. So I don't think this will be your cure-all. But don't feed any meals before 6:30, milk or food. And then forge ahead until 12 o'clock, 11:45 at the earliest. I want you to put, is it her? I don't see if it's, oh yeah, she. I want you to put her down for her nap between 11:45 and 12. And in the meantime, and I will tell you, I did this, it was January when we did it, in December, January. And so it was cold. And it felt like I was torturing her, but keeping her awake in the morning. Like I would have to go outside to like shock her by the cold for a few seconds and then bring her back in. And she was like trying to like literally doze off my arms. I'm like, no, stay awake. To make it to nap time. But it really, really helped. So that was a few days of doing that. All in all, this whole thing was fixed in 11 days for us. So forge ahead to 11:45 noon. Let her nap up to 2.5 hours from that time, and then move that bedtime up a little bit to see if it helps with your early waking. So think about testing out 6:30, 6:45, and see if you notice a difference. So possibly a longer nap, no morning nap. We don't want to encourage a split night. And then think about an earlier bedtime, particularly if she's tired. She's clearly tired. She could go to bed in the 6 to 6:30 window. If she's happy as a clam, had a great nap, doesn't seem tired, somewhere between 6:30 and 7. And that's when I want her hitting the mattress. Okay, hopefully that helps a little bit. And if you're struggling also with like what to do in the early morning wake up, you might want to check out my How to Quickly Recover from a Sleep Regression workshop. You can find it at sleepandwellnesscoach.com/programs. That workshop can be helpful with that window. Okay. Sarah, WLOLB, Wolb, said, I have a 3 and 4-year-old in big beds. How to get them to fall asleep alone. If I'm not with them, they scream and cry and run out of the room. Okay. Sarah, the 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds are my jam. When it comes to my one-on-one coaching, I work with more 3-year-olds at this point than any other age group. So I work with kids newborn all the way into school age through middle school, but the 3-year-olds are who I feel like I work with the most one-on-one because they're a tricky group. They're very opinionated and they are walking, talking. They have a lot of big feelings and emotions, and it's tricky. So I actually have an entire program, a very lengthy, hours long program that walks you through different methods on how to do this because there's no one right way. And interesting, you have two. Sometimes with 2 kids, and I don't know if they're room sharing or not, but a method that works well for one is not going to be the ideal method for the other. So I'm a big advocate when people ask me all the time, like, what's your method of choice for sleep training? Or in this age, it's a little different than sleep training, but sleep interventions. I don't have a specific method of choice. I really try to pair the method with the child's personality and then also kind of meeting them where they are. But here's what I will tell you, no matter what method, whether you go through my program and choose a method, we work together one-on-one and choose a method, or if you're like, hey, I have a method or I've read a book or my friend told me about a way to do it. Oh, my doorbell might be about to get rung by someone who's going to work on my dryer. So if you have a method, you need to communicate the plan to have an effective result. You have to tell your child exactly what is going to happen going forward. That is incredibly important. So here's our new plan. Here's what we're going to do. You want to have really clear expectations around bedtime, the whole bedtime routine, about how you're going to handle once you tuck them in. What are you going to do? And this is where the method comes in. I don't know. So they don't fall asleep alone. Like, how are you going to teach them to confidently fall asleep on their own? It's not like, and now I'm going to walk out the door and see you later. Good luck. You're on your own, kid. That's not going to work well with children who aren't used to falling asleep independently. So it's communicating how we're going to build their confidence up around falling asleep on their own. So that's a big thing and a little more than I can go into on this. But the other thing I will tell you that I think really sometimes surprises people is you don't want bedtime to be too late. And so the 3 and 4-year-old age group will often catch a second wind between 7 and 7:30 p.m. And then it's like taking hours to fall asleep. And so I work with kids come to me, they're going to bed at 10:30, 11 p.m. And I move those bedtimes up depending if they're napping or not, but somewhere not napping, sometimes as early as 6:30 p.m. Napping, I wouldn't want them napping more than an hour to an hour and a half. Lights out by 7. And so doing that in conjunction with having a really good plan can help you get ahead of their second wind. Making sure 3 and 4-year-old, my kids are only 18 months apart, they like to rile each other up when they're at that age, making sure they're not being wild in the hour up to bedtime. So think about no screens, no running, no jumping, no tickling, no chase, no hide and seek. Ideally this time of year, I know it's tough, but not playing outside the hour before lights out. So setting them up to be able to fall asleep a little more easily can help as well. So those are some kind of key things to keep in mind. But also you might want to check out my program where I walk you through different ways to approach it. But even if you don't do that and you have your own plan, communicate and then follow through, follow through, follow through. And doing that with confidence. You having the confidence of what you're going to do if they don't follow your plan is critically important for that plan to be successful. You're welcome, Alexandra. Um, would a cat nap help? Well, cat naps don't help. So we only want one midday nap. Okay, Emmy Bims said, any recommendation for melatonin-free sleep support supplements to help with wind down in the evening? So, no, I don't have a supplement for that. Well, some people will say magnesium. Don't. I'm not anti-magnesium, that's properly dosed for your child, but I don't find that it's a cure-all. And I've even tested magnesium for my own sleep. I don't think it hurts my sleep, but not necessarily a cure-all, although there are a lot of people who swear it can help with sleep. So, if your child is low in magnesium, it can certainly help. So whether your pediatrician will test them for that, up in the air, or whether you want them to be tested for that. So that'd be something you could talk to your pediatrician about. But other than that, just to touch on melatonin, I'm thrilled you're asking the question. I'm not a big proponent of melatonin for kids, and I have a podcast episode on this as well. Let me see if I can pull it up so I can tell you guys. I keep mentioning episodes and I have not told you where they are. Melatonin. Where did we go over melatonin? It was in the spring. Oops, I'm back here. Where did we go over? Melatonin. Episode 178 of the How Long Till Bedtime podcast. I talk about melatonin and why I'm not a big fan of it. Long story short is it's not well studied in children. And I fall in the camp of believing that our children are the experiment for melatonin because our generation did not grow up taking melatonin. So anybody who tells you that we know what melatonin will do for children long term is lying because we don't know. Our kids are the first kids who will have been on it long term. Oh, you said your episode helped. My husband really wanted to try melatonin to help with onset of sleep. And sure enough, we had night wakings. Okay, great. I'm so glad you've already listened to that episode and that it helped. So I guess I'm back to your question. I don't have a great recommendation. The most important recommendation I would give, and I don't know how old your child is really thinking about that hour before bedtime. And what we're doing in that hour before bedtime is helping prepare their body to release its own melatonin, to maximize their natural ability to be ready for sleep. So you want to think about a calm hour. So no running, no jumping, no chasing, no tickling, no wrestling, potentially no playing outside, no screen time, and things that are calming. So you have your bedtime routine, you have reading. If your child's a little bit older and you have more time in there, calmly playing a game. I used to play Uno with my kids or sit and play the flip matching games if we had ended dinner early. A lot of times for my kids, dinner was part of that. So ours was kind of from the time we sat down to the time we went to bed. There were no more screens. There was no more running. There was no more jumping. And so dinner was a piece of that hour. And then we kind of transitioned right into bedtime. But really protecting that hour. And then the other thing is making sure they're not going to bed too late. So when we go to bed too late, we miss our body's natural pull to sleep. So me, for example, Everyone's is a little bit unique, but my ideal bedtime is really 9:30 to 9:45, so I'm asleep before 10 o'clock, and then the chance of me falling asleep quickly and sleeping through is significantly higher. So if I stay up past 10, watch out world, I can stay up till midnight or later if I'm working on a project. Um, I typically won't have a hard time falling asleep. That's not my hang up, but because my melatonin production will be a little messed up and I've fallen asleep out of alignment with my ideal sleep rhythm, I will have the 4 a.m. wake up. But for a lot of people, it means it's hard to fall asleep. So really getting curious about your child's ideal bedtime. When is it, if we've done the hour to set them up to fall asleep easily, then the next step is, well, what time, turning lights out, do they fall asleep? My goal is within 20 minutes, in 5 to 20 minutes, and then have a good night of sleep. What is the timing? So we really need to get curious about what sets them up for sleep success, both with activities leading up to bedtime and with the timing of their sleep. So hopefully that helps a little bit. Okay. Sarah said they don't share a room. We've tried to share, but didn't help. Oh yeah, sharing will not help, Sarah. I do not, that's not usually a fix. And you said, okay, thank you. I will look into your support options. Okay, cool. All right. I think those were all of the live questions. And assuming I'm using YouTube correctly, I don't see any live questions over on YouTube. So it's my first time using YouTube Live, so we'll see how that goes. But I don't think there are any questions over there either. So I will be back in August with another nap chat or sleep Q&A. And let me look and tell you guys when that's going to be in case you want to mark your calendars. All right, the next sleep Q&A or nap chat is going to be on Friday, August 15th at 12 p.m. Eastern. And there will be a post that goes up on Instagram inviting people to submit a question in advance. And then I'll go live and answer those questions and any live questions on that date. So I will see you guys back here then. Okay, bye for now.